decades.
If you look
right?
back across
the U.S.
history,
government
there are
line
these
was
moments,
basically
this handful of stories where
supernatural stuff,
physical
psychic
world just
powers,
seems
telepathy,
to,
seeing
well,
things far away
rebel
with your
against
mind.
the laws of physics.
Pure
Absolutely.
fantasy.
Moments where that line,
Yeah, that was
the
the public
boundary between
face.
the living and
Complete
the
skepticism.
deceased.
But
It doesn't
you know,
just get
while that was
blurry,
the
kinda
official
get
story,
smashed.
behind
Yeah,
closed doors,
utterly
something.
demolished.
And for a modern
Something
case,
much
one that's
stranger was
surprisingly
apparently going on.
verifiable.
Deep
don't look back to
inside
the
the
Victorians.
intelligence community.
You land
It's a really interesting contrast, isn't it?
squarely in the
Publicly,
1990s,
it's all scientific
deep in the
dismissal.
English countryside.
Privately,
Right.
the
We
Pentagon,
were opening
the
the
CIA,
files on the Scole Experiment.
they're clearly
Whole
wrestling with
Norfolk.
something very different.
Running from
These
1993 to
fantasies suddenly
1998
become,
sounds, well,
a
almost
serious
quaint,
strategic
like a setting
issue.
for a
Exactly.
village mystery,
And that
maybe?
worry,
It does,
that sort
but
of creeping
what
fear
supposedly
about
happened in that
psychic
farmhouse
warfare
cellar,
leads to one
I
of
mean,
the
it fundamentally
honestly
challenges
most
pretty much
bizarre and
everything we
top
think
secret
we know about
projects of the whole
reality.
Cold
Because this
War.
wasn't your
Project
typical
Sunstreak.
seance, was it?
I mean,
Not
just
just
picture
table tipping or
an actual
whispers?
government
No, not at
project
all.
trying to
Yeah.
weaponize
Claims
the human
were
mind. Well,
spectacular.
We're talking
Totally
disembodied
And
voices.
officially, the cover
lights that
story, or
seemed
maybe the
intelligent,
initial idea was
objects just
remote
appearing, and
viewing.
the big one.
Right. This
Tangible,
supposed
physical evidence.
Tangible,
ability
right.
for trained people
That
to
tangible
just
part is what really sets Skull
perceive
apart.
distant places.
They
secret
claim they could
enemy
produce
bases, maybe
physical
even peek into
effects.
the future.
Think
All just
photographs
using their
appearing on
minds.
film.
And we should be clear, this
Film that
wasn't
had
some
been
like
sealed,
side
checked,
hobby. It
and
wasn't just
even
a few folks
supplied by
messing around.
independent scientists.
This was
Okay,
a
and your
strategic
sources
move,
suggest
a
this
direct
level of
response
phenomenon,
to what
it
they
attracted
thought
more
Soviets
than
were
just
doing.
ghost hunters.
They were
right?
urgently
definitely.
trying
This
to get
wasn't
an
just
edge
casually
in a
observed. It
completely new
apparently
kind of,
came
well,
under intense
battlefield.
scrutiny.
And that's what we're doing today.
from
We're going to peel back
physicists,
those layers of
professional
secrecy,
psychologists,
really
and
deep
maybe most
dive into
disturbingly,
Project Sunstreak,
members of high-level
and the kind of
intelligence
wild
agencies.
Intelligence
conspiracy
agencies.
theories that
Okay,
are still
we'll get to
swirling
that.
around it.
So yeah,
our
because the
mission in
story
this
goes
deep dive,
way
then,
beyond
is
just
to really
psychic
unpack the
spying.
key
Oh,
evidence.
absolutely.
Look
It might have
closely at
cracked
how
open the
rigorous
door
the
to, well,
investigations actually
alien
were.
contact, maybe
and
even
explore these
some sources
competing,
suggest
frankly
interdimensional
unsettling
conflict.
theories
It gets
about
pretty
why
out
it all
there.
just
It
stopped.
really does.
Abruptly
So we're going to
in
look at where it came
1998.
from, the
Okay,
really
let's unpack
unsettling
this.
things.
So
the
the
viewers
foundation, it
reported
all
seeing,
starts with the Scole
the,
Experimental Group.
weird overlaps with
This was
old
led by
occult
Robin
stuff,
and Sandra Foy,
and these incredible
along with
claims
two
about
mediums,
contacting
Alan and Diana Bennett. Well,
Well,
the
kick
unknown.
things off in
So yeah,
1993 in this
settlement.
sort of
This is where
secluded
things get
farmhouse
weird.
cellar,
So
and
where
committed
did
to 5
Sunstreak
years of
even
weekly
come from?
sessions.
5
It really
years.
kicks off back
And you
in
said
the
they
early
weren't just
70s.
aiming
There
for
was
like
this sort of
faint knocks or
quiet
messages.
panic
They were after
brewing
something called
in
physical
the intelligence
mediumship.
world
What does
during
that
the
actually
Cold War.
involve?
Right.
And
Word
why
got out
the
that
total
the Soviets
darkness?
were
That always
pouring
raises
serious
flags.
money and effort
Right,
into
physical
parapsychology.
mediumship, and not just dabbling.
Well,
We're
it's the
talking
idea that
state-sponsored
spirits,
experiments,
or whatever these entities
telepathy,
are,
moving
can manipulate
objects with the
energy
mind,
and matter
psychokinesis,
enough
and
to produce
crucially,
tangible
remote
results
viewing.
you can see
Yeah,
or
and when
touch,
U.S.
not
intelligence
just
picked
feel
up
or
on this,
hear.
so
alarms
physical
went off.
objects moving,
Big
things
time.
forming. The
Exactly.
Pentagon
They wanted
especially.
hard
You can imagine the
objects
fear,
moving
right?
on their
What if
own,
this stuff is
materials
real?
forming
Even if it only
seemingly out
gives
of
us thin
small
air,
event.
maybe even
Exactly.
human-like
The
figures
U.S. could be
appearing.
completely
Now, the
blindsided in a
darkness,
conflict that
according to
doesn't
the group,
use
that was
bombs
crucial.
or spies
Why?
in the
They
traditional
argued
sense.
it was needed
So
to
this
conserve the
perceived
energy they
threat,
sometimes
sometimes
called
called
ectoplasm. It leads
that
directly
old
to
term
the
that the
CIA
entities supposedly
stargate
needed
to
to
physically
which
manifest.
was kind of the umbrella
They
program.
insisted
And
it
under
wasn't for
Stargate, you get
trickery,
these
but necessary
sub-projects.
for the,
Project
well, the
Sunstreak
complex
was one of
physics
them,
involved.
run by the Defense
Okay, so the
Intelligence
darkness
Agency,
itself
the
was
DIA,
framed as part
mostly
of the
through the
method,
1980s.
not just stagecraft.
Okay. So
Precisely.
Sunstreak gets
And
going.
they tried to balance
and
that by
on
insisting
paper,
on having independent
its
witnesses
job
present.
sounds
Often academics,
well,
scientists,
almost straightforward
people
for
who were
that
there
world.
specifically to
Recruit
document
people,
things
train
rigorously
them
And
as
did things
remote
start
viewers.
slow? Mhm.
Initially, yes.
Get them to project
the sources
their
mentioned
consciousness,
faint lights,
basically,
noticeable
and
drops
spy
in
on
temperature,
Soviet facilities.
the usual
gather
raps
intel.
and knocks.
Standard espionage.
But they also
just with a
confirm it
very
escalated
unconventional method.
rapidly.
But that's not how it
and,
played out, was it?
quite
It became clear
dramatically.
pretty fast
Okay,
this
let's talk
wasn't
about
just
the
about
lights then,
finding
because that's
missile
where it
silos.
really
No,
starts
almost
to
right away,
sound
the viewers weren't just
impossible,
describing,
frankly.
submarine
Witnesses
pens or radar
reported
installations.
hundreds
The
of
data
tiny
start
glowing
getting
orbs appearing in
weird.
pitch
Weird
darkness.
how.
Yes, tiny
Well, that was the
orbs,
big turning
described
point,
as
really.
darting around
The
like
viewers started
fireflies,
reporting
changing
things
colors,
that,
sometimes
based on
merging
our normal
together.
understanding
But what
of
makes
physics
that
and
different
reality
from,
just
say,
shouldn't
some
exist.
clever
Things that shouldn't
projection or
exist.
chemical
Okay,
trick?
now we're
Well,
getting
what's
fascinating.
Yeah,
And what the
the
investigators
information
really
they were
focused
bringing
on
back
were
was
the specific
pushing way
observations.
past the boundaries of what
Witnesses,
anyone
including
expected.
some quite
It
skeptical ones from
fundamentally
the
challenged what
Society
the
for Psychic
program was even
Research,
supposed
or
to be doing.
SPR.
Okay.
So tell me about
They
these
claimed
viewers. They weren't
these
just
lights weren't
random
just
people
random.
off the street, right?
They seem to
Yeah.
respond
Many had
intelligently.
military backgrounds.
That's
as
right.
if
Often
guided
military
or
personnel.
directed.
And they
Guided.
went through this really
And then there's
specific,
the really
structured
mind-bending
training.
They saw
Controlled
these lights,
protocols
this
was the
luminous
term, like
energy,
coordinate remote
going to
viewing or
solid
CRV.
objects.
CRV, okay.
Like a
So
table
it
or a
wasn't
wall.
just
Yes,
like
an
closing
emergent
your
tact
eyes
on
and
the other
hoping for
side.
the best.
No,
That's the
no,
part
very
that just
systematic.
defies physics
They
as we
might
know
be
it.
given
Absolutely.
just a
If
set
that
of geographic
observation is
coordinates
accurate,
or
I mean,
maybe
you're
a
looking at
random
some kind of
number
energy
linked
phenomenon
to a
that can just
target. Then they'd go through these
phase through
stages,
the
sort of
atomic structure
drilling
of
down,
solid
describing
matter.
sensory
opens up all
details,
sorts of
sketching
questions.
Right.
impressions.
Does that mean spirits
trying to
manipulating
build
energy in
a
ways we
picture
don't
of a target
understand?
they knew nothing about
Or are we dealing with
consciously.
something else entirely?
Often something
Maybe
hidden miles
interdimensional
away, maybe
entities
even
whose
sealed in
physics
an
just work
envelope
differently.
right there in
Okay,
the
here's
room.
where it gets
And did it
really
work
interesting for me
initially?
because we move
Well, the
from
early
lights,
results were
which
apparently
are hard to capture definitively,
intriguing,
to the
impressive
film
maybe,
evidence.
but small
This was
scale.
supposed to be the clincher,
sketches that
right?
looked
The hard
surprisingly
proof.
like a
Exactly.
Soviet factory.
We're talking standard,
Details about a hidden
off-the-shelf,
bunker that later
unexposed
matched
rolls of
spy
film.
photos.
Supplied by.
And
Enough to
this
keep
is
the
key
funding
point
flowing,
for
definitely.
countering
So it had
fraud
some
accusations.
legs.
Yeah.
But then, like you
The
said,
group
things
allowed
took a turn.
investigators,
A sharp turn, yeah.
often
because it's
highly
one thing to
skeptical ones
sketch
from
a
the
building you
SPR,
shouldn't
to
know
bring their
about.
own
It's something
film.
else
Yeah.
entirely
This
when
film
you're
was
trained
then sealed in
military
light-proof
viewers
containers,
start reporting
metal
experiences
boxes,
that just
sometimes lead-lined,
flat out defy the
wrapped in
material
extra
world
foil.
as we know it.
and
What-
crucially
what kind of
placed
thing?
on the seance table
Well,
by the
get
investigators
this.
themselves.
Some viewers started
Hold on, let's just
reporting
pause there.
energy
How good were
beings.
these
What energy
seals?
beings?
Yeah, because
Not
a
people,
skeptic
not
immediately
animals,
thinks,
just
okay, they could've
conscious
swapped
energy
it or
forms that were
exposed it
apparently
somehow in the
watching
dark.
them while they were doing the
anticipated
remote
that.
viewing.
Watching the viewers.
The
Okay, that's
SPR
crazy.
investigators often
Others
took
claimed they
precautions
weren't just
like
moving across
signing their
space,
names across
but
the
across
tape seals,
time,
using
getting
unique
glimpses
serial
of ancient
numbers on the
history
containers,
or even
and
future
frequently
events.
they'd take possession of the
Time
container
travel.
immediately after the session.
And develop it themselves.
There's one
Yes,
really
develop it in
famous
their own
or
independent
infamous
labs.
account.
The protocols were
A viewer
specifically designed to
insisted
make
they saw
tampering,
the Egyptian
certainly
pyramids
without
being built,
sophisticated
but
equipment
not
and
by
collusion,
Egyptians,
extremely
by
difficult,
quote
if not
tall
impossible, in those
luminous
conditions.
entities.
Okay, so under
Luminous
these
entities
apparently
building the
strict
pyramids.
conditions,
I mean, that
what actually
sounds like
showed
something
up on
from
the
a
development film?
fringe documentary.
The results
Exactly,
were,
except these were
well,
reports coming from
varied
within
and
a
pretty
classified
shocking.
military
One of the
intelligence
most famous
program.
images
That's what makes you
is a
stop
clear
and think.
portrait.
Yeah,
The face of a
Any
woman.
other examples?
Oh yeah,
completely unknown
another
to the
one
group.
just as strange.
Then there were written
A viewer
messages,
claimed they found
sometimes
hidden
in quite
spacecraft
old-fashioned,
under the
archaic
ice in
handwriting,
Antarctica.
that the medium
Hidden
swore they didn't
spacecraft.
recognize and
Like
couldn't
UFOs.
reproduce.
And even
That
some
seems to
strange
be the
symbols,
implication,
too.
and
Yes, these
guarded
bizarre,
apparently
almost
by some kind of
code-like patterns and
consciousness that
symbols.
resisted intrusion.
These were really
like a
significant
psychic
because
guard
they didn't
dog,
seem to
but
match
not a
any
dog.
known
Okay, wow.
human language.
So these reports
or
were they
even
just ignored,
artistic
filed
style.
away as crazy.
So that feeds
Well,
into
officially,
the,
a lot of the stuff
the
was
probably
non-human
downplayed
idea.
or buried,
Exactly.
classified
That's the
deep.
evidence
But
proponents of the
inside the
non-human
project,
intelligence theory point
the
to.
whispers started.
Suggesting
The
these
idea
weren't
took
messages
hold
from
that
Aunt
maybe
Mildred,
remote
but maybe
viewing wasn't just
communications
about
or even
spying on the
technical
Soviets
diagrams
anymore.
from
Maybe
something, well,
maybe
something
it was
else,
about making
something
contact.
extraterrestrial.
This is where it gets
or
even stranger,
extradimensional,
right?
somehow
The connection or the
imprinting
apparent
onto the
connection
film
to
inside its sealed
occult
container.
practices.
Okay, so beyond the
Yes,
visual
that's
stuff,
another
the
layer
photos,
to this
there was
whole
also
thing
a
that's
shift
just
in the
fascinating.
communication itself.
Right.
People
Voices.
within the program
Yes.
apparently
Disembodied
started
speech
noticing
reportedly
these
became quite
disturbing
common.
parallels
Witnesses
between
described
the
everything
remote
from
viewing
whispers to
techniques they were
loud,
developing
booming
and
voices,
refining,
offering
and practices
philosophical
found
thoughts,
in really
reassurances
old
about an
occult
afterlife,
traditions.
typical seance
Occult
stuff.
traditions,
Yeah.
like
And it
Uh,
changed.
But then the
methods
nature of
described
the
in esoteric
contact
orders.
seemed to take a
Groups
critical,
like the Hermetic Order of
almost
the Golden Dawn
chilling
or the
turn.
Rosicrucians.
This was around
Okay.
1996.
They were looking at rituals for
The
astral
group started
projection,
reporting
achieving trance
communications not
states,
just with deceased
intense
humans,
visualization
but with
exercises,
entities
the whole idea
who
of separating your
specifically identified
consciousness from your
themselves as
physical
non-human
body.
Wait, so the
intelligences.
technique
Okay, that's a
Sunstreak was teaching
fundamental
its
shift,
military
isn't it? From
viewers.
spiritualism
Seem
to
to
something
directly
It really is.
mirror these
These entities
ancient
apparently
mystical
claimed
practices.
they were
It's quite
from other
striking when you put
dimensions.
them side by side.
So
and
the
that
question
they were
becomes,
using the energy the
was
Scole
the
group
Pentagon,
generated
was the DIA
as a sort of
inadvertently
unique
stumbling
doorway,
onto
a
or maybe
conduit to
rediscovering
access our reality.
some kind of ancient technique?
You see the transition
Something
from
mystics
contacting
and secret
spirits
societies
to
have been
essentially
using for
facilitating
centuries.
interdimensional
That's the
physics.
implication,
That
yeah.
immediately
Was this
raises the
military
stakes.
intelligence program
Significant.
actually
And if that wasn't
an
enough, your
unwitting or
sources
maybe
mentioned
witting
a
occult
specific
experiment?
warning they received.
That's a
They do.
pretty much
One
been big thought.
communication
And it didn't
allegedly
stop
was
there,
a
did it?
direct and
The experiences
pretty
got
blunt
darker.
warning.
They did.
The message
Some
basically
viewers
said that
started
humanity
reporting
was
encounters
fundamentally
with
unprepared,
actively hostile
not ready for the kind of
presences.
scientific and
How?
metaphysical
They
knowledge that was
described,
starting to come through
entering
that
a
cellar.
location
The
mentally,
entities apparently
projecting their
claimed
consciousness
that
there
if the
only to be
experiments kept
confronted,
going at
not
that
by
intensity,
human guards,
great
but
danger
by
would
what they
follow.
described as shadowy
Not just for the Scole
entities,
group members,
things that
but
seemed
potentially
fully
for the
aware
wider
of their
world.
psychic
That's
intrusion
quite
and
a
actively
message.
tried
And
to
that
block
kind of
them or
escalation
push
in
them
the
on
Aware
a
of
lot
them.
more attention.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
psychic
Huge
guards.
international
Essentially,
scrutiny.
yes,
Researchers
which
came from
raises
Germany,
a really
the US,
profound
the UK,
and frankly
all trying
unsettling
to
possibility.
replicate
Which
it,
is?
debunk
Well,
it,
if the human
or
mind
just
can actually
understand it
travel
under
outside the
controlled
body,
conditions.
And this
maybe
international
those
attention
non-physical realms aren't empty. Maybe other
conspiracy
intelligences
angle
already
really
lived
starts to
there.
And maybe they don't
Precisely, because
appreciate visitors.
alongside the
Exactly.
academics,
Entities that
allegedly,
really
were
didn't
observers from
want
British
people like
intelligence
Sunstreak
and the
viewers
US
poking
equivalent,
around. It makes you
the
wonder.
CIA.
Okay, hold on.
Was
Why on earth
Sunstreak
would the
opening
CIA
doors
be
that had been
interested in a
deliberately
séance
shut
in a
for a
Norfolk
very
cellar?
long time? For a
That sounds
good
like
reason.
classic
Okay,
fringe
so if they were
paranoia,
opening doors,
unless is there
What
some
exactly
kind of
did they find on
there's
the
a
other
strong
side?
precedent, actually.
Because some of the most
and the sources
sensational
connect these
claims
dots
are about
intelligence agencies.
aliens.
Fundamentally, they're
Extraterrestrial.
interested in any knowledge or
Absolutely. This is where the
technology that
story
gives a
really goes into
strategic
high
edge.
gear.
We
Now,
actually have
if these Scole
declassified
phenomena were
documents,
real
fragments,
intelligent lights,
hints really that suggest
manifesting
some
matter that
remote viewing
implies a
sessions were
grasp of
specifically
physics or
targeting
energy
Mars.
way beyond
Mars.
ours. And you have to remember
the Project
Planet
Stargate
Mars.
back
The
in the
Planet
70s and
Mars.
80s.
The remote viewing
There's one
experiments.
particularly
Exactly.
famous session
The CIA
often cited,
invested
where a
heavily
viewer
in
gives
trying
this
to use
incredibly
psychic abilities
detailed
for
description.
spying. So
They
the
claimed
idea of tapping
they were
into
observing Mars
non-conventional sources
millions
of
of years
information
ago.
or power
Millions.
isn't actually
And they described
foreign
seeing
to them.
these
So the
tall
interest isn't
beings
contacting
sheltering
spirits,
inside
it's
massive
could
pyramidal
this be
structures.
Pyramids on Mars.
Pyramids on
Or
Mars, as their
is it
planet was
advanced
dying
tech
from
from
somewhere
them?
else. A civilization
thinking.
facing extinction.
If
Wow,
Scole
okay.
somehow stumbled
That's quite a
upon a
claim.
genuine,
It is, and it wasn't just
reproducible doorway
Mars.
to another
Other
reality,
sessions
or
allegedly
a source
targeted
of truly
well-known
advanced
UFO
knowledge,
hotspots
the
and crash
intelligence
sites on
community
Earth,
would absolutely
including
view that as a
Roswell.
major
Roswell
national
had to be
security
in
issue.
And
Either an
viewers
asset
reportedly
to
described
control
seeing
or a threat to
non-human
contain.
bodies,
So maybe they weren't
alien
just
artifacts,
watching,
all
but
hidden
potentially
away deep
interfering.
The
inside
sources
classified
suggest that
government
possibility.
facilities.
Trying
So
to
not
assess
just
the
seeing
risks,
things
maybe
far
understand the
away,
entities
but
involved.
seeing
And then
things the
suddenly,
government was
it all
actively
stops.
hiding.
1998.
That's the claim.
Silence.
It suggests
Why?
the
Why
viewers
shut
weren't
down
just
something that
passive
could
observers.
potentially prove
They were
consciousness survives
potentially
death?
uncovering
Answer the biggest
evidence
question
of an
ever.
alien
Well,
presence
the
that was
official
being
reason
actively
given by the
concealed.
Scole Group
And then
itself
there's Wright
was
Patterson Air Force
exactly
Base,
along
right?
the lines of that warning.
Always comes up in these
They
stories.
claimed the phenomena
Wright
had
Patterson.
just become too
Another
intense,
chilling account
too
involved
dangerous.
a viewer who
Dangerous
claimed
how?
they psychically
described the
entered a
atmosphere in the
hidden
cellar
chamber
becoming
deep
heavy,
underground there.
oppressive.
What do they see?
Containers.
They felt that
holding
dark forces, as they
biological
put it,
specimens
were starting
that
to
were completely
infiltrate the
unlike
sessions.
anything known on Earth.
Malevolent
Alien
or
bodies,
mocking
basically.
energies
That's
disrupting
the
things.
strong
Okay, that's the
implication.
official line.
And another viewer,
But the unofficial
possibly targeting the
whispers,
same
the ones
location or a
connecting
similar
back to
one,
that alleged
claimed they
intelligence
witnessed
presence.
some kind
Those
of
suggest
psychic
something else.
network. Something
The
connecting
unofficial
human
theories
minds
lean
to,
towards the group being
something
actively
else.
suppressed.
Something beyond our world,
Either by
out
those
among the stars.
shadowy
The psychic
human
network
authorities who
connecting us
feared
to
the
the
knowledge
aliens.
getting
That
out,
was the report.
feared the destabilization.
So you look at all these accounts together.
Or
Mars,
perhaps they were
Roswell,
warned off
Wright
directly
Patterson,
by the
psychic network.
good
It paints a
non-human
very different
entities
picture than
themselves,
just spying on
who
the
saw the
Soviets.
danger their
Completely
continued
different. If you
contact was
take these
attracting.
reports at face
Either
value,
way, the
even just
consensus among
partially,
those who lean
the implication
conspiratorial
is huge.
the door was slammed shut,
Project
whether by the
Sunstreak
group's choice
might have
or by
started as
outside coercion.
espionage,
Which
but
leaves
it
this
seems to have
massive
pivoted.
unanswered
It
question
became
mark in the
about
research.
preparing
A
for
huge gap.
contact with
It really
non-human
does.
intelligence.
And this raises
Or
that
maybe
big
more
question.
cynically, about
Okay,
making sure that
what does this all
contact
mean for us
remained
now?
a secret.
What are we left with?
Kept
Yeah.
far
Well, we
away
have to
from
stay
the
impartial
public
here.
eye.
Just report what the
But
sources
the theories
concluded.
don't even stop at
Essentially,
just
there are
ETs from other
5
planets,
main
do they?
ways
Some people take it even
interpret
further.
what happened
That's
in that
right.
cellar.
There's
Okay,
a
lay
whole
them out
other
for
branch
us,
of
starting
theory
with the
suggesting
simplest
Sunstreak
explanation.
wasn't just
The
encountering
first, and
extraterrestrials,
remember, the
but
group's original
potentially
goal is simply
interdimensional beings.
genuine
Interdimensional,
contact
like
with the
from
afterlife.
parallel
decades.
the spiritualist
The
success
U.S.
story.
government line
They
was
did it,
basically
they proved consciousness survives
supernatural
death,
stuff,
psychic
using
physical
powers,
phenomena.
telepathy,
Okay.
seeing things far
Theory
away with
two.
your mind.
Theory 2,
Pure
stems
fantasy.
from
That's
that
what
dramatic
they told
shift.
Yeah,
in
that was the
who
public phase.
or what they
Complete
were talking to.
skepticism.
But
interdimensional
while that was
entities.
the official story,
These weren't ghosts of
behind
humans,
closed
but maybe
doors,
advanced
something
beings from a parallel dimension,
something much
using the
stranger was
Skull
apparently
energy
going
as a
on.
temporary bridge.
Deep inside
Right, then you get the darker
intelligence
possibilities, which
community.
might explain
It's a
why
really
it ended
interesting
so
contrast,
abruptly.
isn't it?
Exactly.
Publicly,
Theory
it's all
three,
scientific
deceptive or
dismissal.
dark forces.
Privately, the
This
Pentagon,
idea
the
suggests
CIA,
that manipulative, maybe
they're clearly
parasitic
wrestling with
entities
something very
were
different.
pretending to be
These
helpful
fantasies
spirits or
suddenly become
intelligences just to gain
a
influence or
serious
feed off the
strategic
energy.
issue.
Exactly.
That would explain
and
the
that
reported
worry,
toxicity
that sort of
in the end.
creeping
Makes
fear
sense.
about
Theory
psychic
four.
warfare, it
That's
leads
the
to one
full
of the
government black
honestly
project
most
theory.
bizarre
Basically,
and
everything that
top-secret
happened
projects
was
of the
real,
whole Cold
was
War,
meticulously
Project Sunstreak.
observed and
I mean,
documented
just
by
picture it.
intelligence
An actual
agencies,
government
maybe
project
even
trying to
subtly
weaponize
guided,
the human
and then the
mind.
whole public
Funded off
record
the
was
books.
just
Totally
classified.
classified.
And officially, the
Allowed
cover
to fade
story, or
away
maybe
to
the
keep the
initial
knowledge
idea
of
was
non-human
remote
contact under
viewing.
wraps.
Right.
And
This
number 5, the
supposed
one that always comes up with
ability for trained
unexplained
people to
lights
just
and tech.
the
Perceive
alien connection, distant
the
places,
ultimate
secret
friend
enemy
idea,
bases,
maybe even peek
the
into
one
the
that
future.
connects the lights,
All just
the
using their
materializations,
minds.
the symbols.
And we should be clear, this
directly
wasn't
to
some
extraterrestrial
side
technology or
hobby. It
visitation,
wasn't just a few
rather
folks
than
messing
spirits or
around.
dimensions.
This was a
Okay.
strategic move.
So
a
where does
direct
the
response
scientific
to what they
community
thought the
land
Soviets
on
were
all
doing.
this now?
They
Still
were
deeply
urgently trying to
skeptical,
get
I
an
assume.
edge.
Oh,
in a
absolutely.
completely
Deeply
new
skeptical.
kind of,
They point to the darkness,
battlefield.
and that's
So
what
we're doing
reliance
today.
on
We're
witness
gonna peel back
testimony,
those
however
layers of
credible,
secrecy,
the fact it couldn't be
really,
reliably replicated
deep
elsewhere.
dive into
All valid
Project
points.
Sunstreak,
But
and
the
kind of
counterpoint,
wild conspiracy
which the sources
theories that are
emphasize,
still swirling
is that
around.
you had
Yeah, because
respected
the story goes
scientists,
way beyond
engineers,
just
researchers,
psychic
people who
spying.
went into that cellar
It might
armed
have
with
cracked
detectors
open
and
the door
protocols.
to, well,
Total
alien
skeptics who
contact,
came out
maybe
saying
even
they
some sources
witnessed things they
suggest
simply could not
interdimensional
explain
conflict.
conventionally.
It gets pretty out
So
there.
they were either
really
fooled
does.
by an
So we're gonna
incredibly
look at where it
elaborate
came from, the
hoax.
really
An
unsettling
impossibly
things
complex
that
hoax
viewers reported
involving
seeing,
multiple
the,
independent parties over
weird
years.
overlaps with old occult
Or
stuff,
they actually
and
saw
these
something
incredible
genuinely
claims about
profound,
contacting,
maybe even disturbing.
well, the
So
unknown.
the Scole
So, yeah,
Experiment, it
settle
just
in.
hangs
This is where
there,
things get
doesn't it?
weird.
One of the most
So where did
compelling but
Sunstreak
also
even
deeply
come from?
paradoxical
It really
cases
kicks off
for,
back in the early 70s.
well,
There
for
was this
hidden
sort of
realities.
It
quiet
really does. You've
panic
got these
brewing
highly controlled
in the
circumstances,
intelligence
at least in
world
terms
during
of the
the
film
Cold War.
evidence.
Right. Word
yielding
got out
results
that the
that seem to
Soviets
demand
were pouring
either belief
serious
in an
money and effort into
extraordinary high-tech,
parapsychology.
multi-year
And not just
fraud
dabbling. We're talking
conspiracy,
Sure.
state-sponsored
or a
experiments,
radical physical
telepathy,
breakthrough into
moving objects with
something
the
else,
mind's
something unknown.
psychokinesis,
And that
and
leaves us with a
crucially,
really
remote
provocative
viewing.
final thought.
Yeah,
doesn't
and
it?
when
Something
U.S.
for you,
intelligence
the
picked up
listener,
on
to
this,
really chew on.
alarms
Exactly.
went off. big
if,
time.
and
the
it's a
Pentagon,
huge if,
especially.
You can
if
imagine the
Scole
fear,
Experiment
right? What if
genuinely
this stuff is real?
produced
Even if it only
physical
gives a small
proof
advantage.
Exactly. The
consciousness
U.S. could be
survives death,
completely
proof of other
blindsided in a
dimensions,
conflict that
proof
doesn't
that could
use
fundamentally
bombs or
change
spies
humanity,
in the traditional
maybe
sense.
alleviate
this
so much
perceived
fear.
threat, this potential
Why?
psychic gap,
Why was it
leads
ultimately
directly to the
sidelined,
CIA's
silenced,
starting
largely
Project
forgotten?
Stargate.
Were we
Which
just
is
not
kind of
ready
the
for that kind
umbrella
of
program.
truth?
And under
Was the
Stargate, you
potential
get these
disruption too great?
sub-projects.
That's the
Project
question that
Sunstreak
lingers.
was one
The
of them,
Cellar and Skull,
run by the
it's
Defense
quiet now.
Intelligence
The
Agency,
voices are
the
gone,
DIA,
lights are out,
mostly
but
through
that
the
final
1980s.
haunting thought from the
Okay,
sources
so
really sticks with
Sunstreak
you.
gets
Maybe
going.
the door they opened in that
And on
darkness.
paper,
Maybe it never fully
its
closed.
job sounds,
and perhaps somewhere
well,
out there
almost
in that
straightforward
silence
for that
between
world.
worlds,
Recruit people,
something is still
train
waiting.
them as remote